Exodus chapter 24, verses 12 through 18. The Lord said to Moses, "Come up to me on the mountain, and wait there, and I will give you the tablets of stone with the law and the commandments which I have written for their instruction." So Moses set out with his assistant Joshua, and Moses went up into the mountain of God. To the elders he had said, "Wait here for us until we come to you again, for Aaron and Hur are with you. Whoever has a dispute may go to them." Then Moses went up on the mountain, and the cloud covered the mountain. The glory of the Lord settled on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it for 6 days. On the 7th day he called to Moses out of the cloud. Now the appearance of the glory of the Lord was like a devouring fire on the top of the mountain, in the sight of the people of Israel. Moses entered the cloud and went up on the mountain. Moses was on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. This is the Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 17, verses 1 through 9. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with them. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud a voice said, "This is my Son, the beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome by fear. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Get up and do not be afraid." And when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus himself alone. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus ordered them, "Tell no one about the vision until after the Son of Man has been raised from the dead."
We have 2 stories that are actually related to each other in a sense. We have the story from Moses from Exodus, or actually it's from Exodus, from Exodus, where Moses is told to go up on the mountain, and he's going to receive the tablets of stone of the law. And so we have in that scene there, Moses is the lawbringer. Moses represents the law in this. And that's the Old Testament story. But there's a bigger story that I want to bring out that's not part of this our readings today, is that Moses has a second encounter with the face of God, or has a second encounter with God. Moses has hit the end of his rope. He's fed up. The people are not giving him an easy time. He's really struggling. And he is absolutely beaten up. And he runs away, and he goes and hides in a cave. And God seeks him out, and he says, in their conversation, it comes out, and Moses finally asks God, "I need to see your glory. I need to look at your face." And God says, "I can't let you look at my face, but I'll let you look at me walking away. I'll let you see my back as I'm walking away." We have a very similar scene in 1 Kings chapter 19, where Elijah also is running. He's distraught. He's finished. He's at the end of his rope. Queen Jezebel has been chasing him down. Ahab is... and so his life is miserable. And all of the prophets around him, all the other prophets have been killed. And he's at the end of his life. At the end of his rope. He doesn't feel like he can go any further. And he goes and hides in a cave. It turns out to be the same cave that Moses was hiding in. And Elijah then hiding in the cave. And then God comes to him and asks him, "Why are you here? Why are you here?" And he says, "Because I am beaten up." And eventually then this conversation goes around, and again, this time Elijah asks God, "I need to see your glory. I need to see your face. And I can't let you see my face, but again, like Moses, I'll let you see my backside as I'm walking away." And so in both of those cases, in both of those scenes, the story I think in that is that we're not to see God's face, what direction God is going. We're not to see what his plan is. But in those stories, both of them, you can see the backside of God. You can see as God's moving away, you can see God in the rearview mirror, if you will. You can see God as after the action has happened, we can see the path that God is laying out for us. And I think that's what those two stories kind of represent to them. To Moses and to Elijah, the idea was, you can see where I'm going, and so follow me. Then we have our story today. It says 6 days later. This is 6 days later from the time Peter said, "You are the Christ." Remember that there's a scene there where Jesus asked them, "What do you all say? What did everybody say you are?" "I am." And there's all these answers. "You're Elijah, you're Moses, you're Elijah, you're Moses." And then he asked Peter, "But who do you say you are?" "I am." Peter says, "You are the Christ." And so this is 6 days after that. And now he's taken Peter and James and John, his three of his inner circle. These are the three that he trusts the most with his message. These are the three he's laying everything on. And he asks them to join him on the top of this hill. And he gets up to the top of the hill, and we have the scene that we have in our story here. The clouds of God drift down, just like the cloud on the mountain of Sinai when Moses was receiving the law. The cloud comes down and covers the mountain. And this is the scene that we have here, is that Peter and James and John, they get to watch this, they get to see this, and that's exactly what this is about. This isn't this whole thing, this whole Transfiguration story isn't to bolster Jesus' courage or his ability to move forward. It's not for Jesus. It's for the disciples. It's for those watching what's going on. They see in this, his countenance changes. The word they use is he transfigured. He didn't transform. Transform means taking on a different form. He metamorphosed, which means his appearance changes. His countenance changed. He became bright and shiny, just like Moses. There are so many stories of Moses where he had to hide his face, because when he goes and sits in the presence of God, and he gets irradiated and his skin glows, and if he steps outside where they can see him, everybody's afraid of him. And so he covers his face with a veil. So here we have that same thing is happening to Jesus. Jesus, all of a sudden, he's glowing bright and shiny, and his clothes start glowing. His appearance changes. That's what is transformed. His appearance is changing to those who view him. To his disciples, his appearance changes. His countenance changes. And I think these two visions that they have, well, first off, we have the two visions of Moses and Elijah standing there with him. And that is, again, Moses is the bringer of law, and Elijah is the forerunner of all the later prophets. Elijah is the one who announces, "Here it comes, here it comes, here it comes." We also have Moses also plays a different role too that corresponds with Jesus. Is that in just another chapter, there's a conversation going on, and Jesus relates himself to being Moses. He relates that John the Baptist is Moses, and when Moses was at the end of his life, he put the mantle on Joshua to go into the promise. And so in a way, here is Moses standing on the mountain with Jesus, with Yeshua, which is his real name. We call him the Greek in Jesus, but his real name is Yeshua in the Hebrew. And so here is the Moses figure giving the Jesus figure, the Yeshua figure, the promise, the ability to carry it forward into the promise, to carry it forward into the redemption future. That's what that is. And then Elijah is there also to demonstrate that he is a prophet, that he is bringing forth the future, bringing out the future. So we have Moses who stands there and gives the authority of Elijah, or of Yeshua, of Joshua, of Jesus, and then we have the prophet of Elijah there also. In the story, Peter looks up at this. He's not afraid yet, but he sees what's going on, and he's amazed by this, and he says, "Well, let me build a booth for each one of you, a house, a little hut for you to stay in." The idea is this is actually part of kind of a hospitality thing, but it's also an honoring thing. If he builds them 3 little huts, the idea is they would stay there for a week. And I think Peter's thinking maybe if all 3 of them here, they have this communion and they stay together for a week, they'll talk and I'll be able to learn more. We'll learn more about what it is to be a follower of God if I listen to Moses and Elijah and Jesus having a conversation. So let's build 3 huts for them to stay here. And that's when the noise comes. comes. And that's when the sound of God speaks. And Peter forgets building huts, and instead he hides. He's afraid. Peter, James, and John are frightened. And Jesus reaches out, and I know, you need to know, he just doesn't say the words, "Don't be afraid." He touches them. Now he's full of God's glory here. He's bright and shiny. And he touches them and puts some power back into them and tells them not to be afraid. This is a wonderful story. This is a beautiful story, relating the Old Testament into the New Testament, the law and the prophets of the Old into the New. It's also a promise to us about the redemption of Jesus. That's why he's here. That's his purpose for us, is our redemption, so that we can make it into the promised land. He is our guide into the promise. He is our guide into the future. He is our Yeshua, our Joshua, leading into the promised land. And I think if we look at it, that is what this whole story is about, and we look onto the continents and the brightness of God in the face of Jesus, then we accept that redemption. And we also then can look forward to the promise, the future of God in our lives.